Okay, everyone, another short video today about the Karmelo Anthony trial. A notice of appeal was filed, and in my view, Karmelo Anthony could get a new trial based on errors during jury selection. I talked about that in my last video, and for everyone who wrote in to say it wasn't an all-white jury, I'll say, do you know that for a fact? Fox News originally reported that it was an all-white jury. Then, sometime after the trial, Fox News reported that there were 3 minorities on the 12-person jury. So, what changed? Karmelo Anthony's father spoke to CBS News after the verdict and said it was an all-white jury, and CBS News presumably was at the trial as well, but the interviewer from CBS News didn't challenge him on the racial composition of the jury. Now, sometimes if it comes to the interviewer's attention after the interview, they will use a voiceover when they air the interview to correct the information. So, where was the voiceover? A number of trustworthy sources still maintain that the jury was all white. Now, we were not in the courtroom, so there's a lot we don't know. And the lack of transparency bothers me. For some reason, there was no attempt at all to control the excessive amount of pretrial publicity, but as soon as the actual court proceedings began, there was nothing coming out of that courtroom, nothing verified. For instance, cameras or at least audio during jury selection might have improved the transparency. Okay, now let me talk about Batson, a case from the Supreme Court of the United States, Batson v. Kentucky. Now, the Supreme Court said that the prosecution cannot use peremptory challenges to strike potential jurors solely on the basis of race. That's the Batson v. Kentucky case. Now, even though the Supreme Court has said that, some judges, for all intents and purposes, have banned Batson challenges in their own courtrooms on the alleged ground that the defense attorney's perception of a person's race is just perception and not proof. I mean, that is how absurd it's gotten in some courtrooms, which, as to that example, effectively bans Batson challenges because, as I understand those types of rulings, there needs to be a document with a person's race on it as a foundation for a Batson challenge. Now, when jurors show up for jury duty, they probably don't have an official document with their race on it. Talk about a pretext for denying a Batson challenge. And speaking of pretext, in the Karmelo Anthony jury selection, the prosecution struck 3 potential jurors, allegedly because the prosecution didn't want teachers on the jury. Now, the struck potential jurors who were teachers were all African-American women. Now, was that by sheer coincidence? My understanding is the potential jurors had returned questionnaires beforehand. I believe that was the process that they used. It's used in a lot of jurisdictions. So the prosecution had a lot of time to build their strikes around certain types of jurors. For example, and I'm not saying that this is what happened, but it could be what happened. If the prosecution received the questionnaires in advance, they could have built their strikes around the people they wanted to eliminate, and they could have chosen a race-neutral characteristic in advance that those people shared to eliminate them. So the fact that they were all teachers could have been just a pretext. Now, that's why Batson allows circumstantial evidence such as disproportionate impact to support an inference of invidious discrimination. Now, in the teacher example, maybe the prosecution had no problem at all with teachers until they received the jury questionnaires back. Then, all of a sudden, they developed an antipathy toward teachers. It could happen because I would say teachers on the jury might have helped the prosecution's case because teachers execute discipline, okay? So why strike teachers if you're the prosecution? Now, that doesn't seem to me to be a credible race-neutral explanation for striking teachers if you're the prosecution, especially when you consider that all African-American women struck from the jury were teachers. Now, the prosecution also struck pastors. An African-American man, a pastor, was struck from the jury. So, okay, we have 2 allegedly race-neutral characteristics, pastor and teacher. The prosecution eliminated an African-American man and 3 African-American women from the jury on that basis. Now, the disproportionate impact would be recognized under Batson. The judge didn't recognize it if the defense even challenged those strikes under Batson. In the end, a jury was seated that Karmelo Anthony's father perceived as all white. Now, the CBS News interviewer didn't challenge him on that, as I mentioned. So maybe the interviewer perceived the jury as all white as well if he attended the trial. Now, if he didn't, as I mentioned, when CBS News airs an interview, if there's a factual inaccuracy or uncertainty, CBS News probably will correct it with a voiceover during the interview, but there was no voiceover. I also read the CBS News article on their website, and there was no mention of a multiracial jury being seated. Now, the appeal of this case will be closely watched, at least on this channel, because during the appeal, we might finally get some verified details about what happened during the trial court proceedings. As I mentioned, the lack of transparency around the trial court proceedings is a huge problem. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, leave a like and don't forget to subscribe.